Historians have divided our prehistoric periods in the categories of stone, bronze, and iron. There is not a single word about wood, as if it did not play a role in the development of humankind. Even in those prehistoric ages, we know that mankind learned how to start a fire, and without it, we would not have come this far without wood. When people moved over to the water's edge and started fishing, they used spears, fishing rods, and built boats, which are all made of wood. They started building houses, then castle towns and chapels, all made of wood. Then they invented the wheel and built wagons, all made of wood. Men sailed to America on wooden ships and discovered the rest of the world. Humans owe most of their development to wood, and still it appears that most people are not aware of how incredible this raw material is. The current trends in design and architecture look at wood as an anachronism. The future of wood lies in laminated particle boards, glued with chemicals and covered with a synthetic grain simulating film. A billion-dollar business. Use of wood without the influence of the chemical industry seems impossible today. They produce glues, preservatives, insulation, varnishes, films, and hundreds of other toxic products, which are often deadly to both humans and the environment. It's a market worth billions, and even then, it is instead wood that is considered dangerous because of its alleged flammability. For this reason only, houses were preferred to be made of bricks to last for years and heavily insulated with styrofoam. The world would have kept following this path without a second thought, had there not been one man who, in the recent past, with his experience, perseverance, and endurance, started a revolution in the field of timber. He rediscovered knowledge that was common in ancient times, but was now being derided and mocked in modern Europe. He didn't give up, and finally, the scientists, who initially had mocked him, began to bow to him. Mr. Erwin Thoma, an Austrian, raised in alpine forests, liked to climb, was a mountain guide, but always wanted to become a forester. As a result of his forestry engineering education, like many young people in the 70s and 80s, he was convinced that modern engineering was able to solve every problem. Modern machines, chemistry, and even computer science have inevitably been invading all areas of the economy, forest management as well. In Austria, young foresters often have to wait several decades before getting their own forest supervision area. Thoma was lucky. It turned out that in the Karwendel Mountains, there was an area where no one wanted to be a forester. The forester's home there is totally snowed in and cut off from the world in winter, and the closest store is 50 kilometers away. This was a dream come true for Mr. Thoma, and when he moved there with his wife, he concluded that this was his place and it was a place he would never leave. Unexpectedly one day, two men knocked on the door of Forester Thoma's home. They introduced themselves as violin makers, also referred to as luthiers. They asked for help in finding the right wood to create new instruments. It turned out that old luthier masters used to build the most perfect violins with wood from trees growing in the Karwendel Hills. Dr. Thoma was surprised that no one had ever mentioned this during his education of forestry. Curious and intrigued, he decided to help them in their quest. When they went out to the woods the next day, he learned that the wood specifically used for violins was something extraordinary. Out of 1 million spruce trees, they needed to find the one tree that would be ideal for the creation of a violin. There was no device or machine that could identify such a tree, but only human senses, intuition, and a small amount of knowledge in soil science. A tree like this only grew in specific places, high in the mountains, but resting within wind-sheltered coves. The grain structure of such a tree is particularly fine and even. A windblown tree results in an unstable structure which is unwanted in violins. The luthiers spent days knocking on trees and listening to their sounds, and finally, after a few days, they came to Dr. Toma full of joy. They found a large spruce tree that might be suitable. They were delighted with what they found, so the tree was cut down and taken away to be made into a violin. With time, Dr. Toma forgot about this interesting experience. A year passed, and the luthiers came to knock on his door again. However, this time they did not come for wood. Usually, wood for violins must be seasoned for at least 10 years before it is used. Sophisticated chemical processes, technically insignificant, occur in wood within that long time frame. These processes are, however, important to the process of producing such a special instrument. The luthiers couldn't stand waiting and decided to try and build a violin regardless. To express their gratitude to Dr. Toma and his family, they came to play a small violin concert in front of his home in the middle of the forest. Dr. Toma loved trees and the forest, but he wasn't especially romantic about them. However, the sound of his trees coming from the violin introduced him to a new world. He began to realize that there was more to wood than he had been taught at the universities. He was moved to the point that he couldn't stop thinking about it. He was trying to understand how it was possible. The luthiers had no technology, no measuring instruments, just their intuition, tradition, and old knowledge carried over from generation to generation. And they created such an incredible instrument out of a piece of wood. Two worlds began to collide in his mind. On the one hand, his technocratic engineering education, and on the other one was scientifically unexplained, ancient, and traditional knowledge. When he shared his thoughts in a conversation, one of the luthiers asked if he knew what the added value was when creating such a violin. Of course, Dr. Toma had no idea. "Look," the luthier said, "a violin like this weighs about 470 grams. If you wanted to pay for it with the equivalent of its weight in gold, you would be laughed out of court. If you wanted to pay 10 times as much in gold, you would be laughed at as well. Only if you offered 100 times its weight in gold, you might be lucky and be able to buy such a violin." Craftsmen who had no advanced technology at their disposal were able to make spruce timber 100 times more expensive than gold. It is not just the material value that counts. Such an exceptional instrument becomes priceless for all human cultures, since its sound continues to provide joy to generations of music lovers for centuries. When Dr. Toma's children reached schooling age, he had to quit the forester's position and move with his family to Salzburg, a more civilized area. 2 weeks after moving into their new apartment, the children began to cough consistently. Over time, their coughing became so intense that it created a threat of suffocation. After many visits to the doctors, it turned out that the children were allergic to particle boards that the furniture and the floors in the new apartment were made of. This surprised Dr. Toma, as particle boards were made from wood. It wasn't the wood, said the doctor, but the chemicals seeping out of them. The only solution was cortisone therapy. A leaflet revealed that cortisone administered to children under the age of 20 would destroy their kidneys. Luckily, Dr. Toma's grandfather, a carpenter already in his 80s at that time, had a different yet simple solution. Dr. Toma sent the children with their mother away for the holidays, and together with his grandfather, the two replaced the particle board walls and furniture with simple and handmade solid wood. When the children came back, after a short time, all the symptoms of their allergy disappeared. This was another event in the life of Dr. Toma that made him start questioning modern methods of problem solving. Since the properties of wood saved his children from suffering, he thought that there might be a demand for traditional woodworking. He decided to open a woodworking shop, with an idea that wood might also help other people. He asked his grandfather to be his advisor. And this is how in the 80s they started their business, one that would run completely contrary to the modern trends of civilization. Initially, most of their orders were for flooring. Unfortunately, these floors were often installed in new buildings, where there was still a lot of moisture in the concrete. As a result, the wood would swell with time, and the parquets would expand and contract. Again, it was his grandfather who came up with a solution. He mentioned how we should only and solely use wood that was harvested at its best. What does it mean, though? The idea is to only harvest wood when the sap levels are at its lowest in winter, but most importantly to do it solely during the waning moon. Grandfather, Dr. Thoma replied, I studied forestry engineering in Vienna with the best professors. If such knowledge existed, I would have heard about it a long time ago. Still, his grandfather remained stubborn, saying, I've been doing this all my life. You should try it too. Dr. Thoma was still skeptical. However, he decided to harvest the next batch of timber in January during the waning moon. His timber was set aside in one pile, while lumberjacks continued to work on a new pile of timber, despite the fact that the moon had already entered a different phase. The timber they cut at that time was set aside in another pile at the neighbors. Because of the snow, the wood could not be transported, so they had to wait until spring. Once the snow melted, Dr. Thoma went to fetch the wood. The first thing he did was to check for woodworms, and it turned out there were no signs of pests on it. Out of curiosity, he checked the other pile of wood at the neighbors and found that it was completely infested with woodworms. This was the third time that Dr. Thoma reveled in the fact that there was more knowledge to be learned about wood than what he had learned at the university. As he continued to work with wood, he began conducting his own research and took notes. It turned out that this moonwood, as he called it, was more resistant to fungus, especially to blue stain fungi. It dried faster and was more resistant to fire. And most of all, it was harder and stronger, with no tendency to swell when exposed to moisture. Today, Dr. Thoma builds homes everywhere, including the tropics, next to termite mounds, where everything is usually eaten by insects, except Hole's 100 homes. As he claims, there's never been any problem with woodworms or fungi. The notes he took throughout his observations eventually became a manuscript and was accidentally discovered by a publisher. He talked Dr. Thoma into publishing his first book, I Saw You Grow, in which he precisely described the phenomenon of moonwood. Dr. Thoma's friends advised him not to disclose secrets of his business. However, he believed that he should not keep this precious knowledge to himself because it could change people's thinking about wood and make the world a little better as a result. He believed that what goes around comes around. This book caused a stir among the entire woodworking industry in the German-speaking area, and many old craftsmen reacted positively to it. However, scientists and other industries responded with a hail of criticism and ridicule. He was called the Moon Whisperer and stamped as an esoteric. An Austrian trade magazine had even commissioned research that was supposed to officially confirm that moonwood was nonsense. And of course, test results matched the client's wishes, as it often happens in such cases. However, the book also reached Professor Ernst Zürcher at the ETH Institute in Zurich. It is the best technical university in Europe and one of the most renowned technical universities in the world. Based on his accumulated knowledge, a 5-year research project was organized to study moonwood. Similar research efforts were also initiated in Vienna and Hamburg. The Vienna and Hamburg research was short-lived and proved nothing. On the other hand, the 5-year research in Zurich confirmed the truth of the old grandfather's knowledge. The results of these studies have appeared in the most reputable publications in the world. Professor Zurcher still continues to research the impact of the moon on various nature-related phenomena. The first thing discovered in Zurich was that a tree would pulse in step with phases of the moon. That is, it would swell and shrink in diameter by a fraction of a millimeter. Nevertheless, its length would never change. It was discovered that each tree would form an electromagnetic field around it. One could think of this as some kind of an aura. The field's potential would increase and decrease in step with the phases of the moon. Next, the research concentrated on the intermolecular interactions in wood, most importantly, those related to water. It was discovered that such interactions, similar to tides, also changed under the influence of the phases of the moon. Water, in its liquid state, always manifests in systems called clusters. This phenomenon is poorly researched and contains many secrets yet to unfold. Some theories claim that such clusters carry information. The ETH Institute in Zurich discovered that during the waning moon, individual molecules of water disconnected from the clusters and temporarily combined with single molecules of cellulose on the surface of capillaries. This can be described as the smallest mechanical mixture that exists. This phenomenon brings quantum physics to mind. The water molecule in this state is no longer in a liquid, gas, or solid state. It is in a fourth state described as gelled or gelatinous. Once the moon phase changes, these molecules separate, which is scientifically inexplicable today. The only significant discovery was that it was controlled by the electromagnetic field surrounding the tree. It can be said that the moon affects the water contained in wood rather than the wood itself, thus improving properties of the wood. If the tree is harvested during the waning moon phase, the resulting timber is so resistant to pests and fungi that the use of any wood preservatives or other chemicals is absolutely unnecessary. Such wood has the potential to last for hundreds of years without any maintenance or chemical treatment. As it turns out, this knowledge was already in use in ancient Rome. In their records, moonwood was found to be used in building warships, as it was not prone to be attacked by harmful crustaceans. Julius Caesar instituted the death penalty for shipbuilders who used wood other than moonwood. Pliny, a historian and Roman writer, also wrote about moonwood. Similar laws existed practically in every high culture in human history. The company grew, and Dr. Thoma started building houses from solid wood, which, in the 1980s, was completely against the development of modern building systems at the time. Wooden homes were usually made of frame structures, in which mixed materials such as wood, foil, styrofoam, and others were used together. Dr. Thoma wanted to build houses where people would be surrounded only and completely by wood, without the use of chemicals and toxins, to create an atmosphere similar to old wooden huts he knew from his childhood. They had a uniquely positive atmosphere. Gaining insight into the mystery of this well-being material has become a quiet passion of Dr. Thoma. He had to postpone his work in this area for later because, as it turned out, he still had many obstacles to overcome first. Dr. Thoma developed and patented his own technology of wooden building systems. He called the technology Holes 100 or Wood 100 because Holes 100 buildings were made of 100% wood in which there were no chemicals, screws, or nails. Its walls were for the most part 36 centimeters thick and consisted of 5 layers of horizontal, vertical, and diagonal wooden boards. All layers were joined by dry wooden pegs that swelled with moisture from the surrounding environment and formed an inseparable structure. A water, curd, and lime mix acted as grease to reduce resistance when driving the pegs through the wooden boards with a hydraulic press. Elements prefabricated in such a way were delivered to the project site, and the assembly of a turnkey single-family home took only 1 or 2 days to complete. When humidity changes, timber swells or shrinks, but its length never changes. The cross structure of vertical, horizontal, and diagonal layers provide incredible stability, similar to that offered by a concrete wall, as well as an exceptional durability of the form, even if such a house is flooded. The Center for Chinese Healing Arts, made of holes 100, built on the river of Garsamkamp, Austria, was hit by a 100-year flood for 4 months after it was opened. After the water had subsided, only a bit of cosmetic work and replacement of the floorboards was needed, and the building was ready to be used again. Absence of glue between layers create microscopic air gaps. There are additional air channels between some layers, allowing for improved thermal insulation. In this field, it has been so far assumed that the highest heat transfer coefficient, or the U value, that wood can achieve is 0.14. However, that's true for glue laminated wood. Unglued and mechanically linked walls of Dr. Thoma's have achieved a result twice as efficient, a U value of 0.078. As such, a 36 centimeter thick holes 100 wall would provide a similar insulation to a 75 centimeter thick solid glue laminated wooden wall or a 10 meter thick reinforced concrete wall. Leaving out chemicals and toxins in the processing of holes 100 surprisingly led to breaking the world record for thermal insulation for building materials. The results were so unbelievable that initially the Fraunhofer Institute in Stuttgart refused to issue a certificate. Over time, both the Fraunhofer and the Graz Technical University confirmed the results and issued the relevant certificates. The U value does not tell us everything. However, it turns out to be a poor manipulation created to favor thermal insulation manufacturers. In a laboratory experiment at the University of Graz, 3 walls with identical heat transfer coefficients were compared. An internally insulated prefabricated wall made of gypsum and particle board, a brick wall with polystyrene insulation, and a 30 centimeter solid wood wall of holes 100. The test room was at room temperature without heating, and the outside temperature was minus 10 degrees centigrade. The test measured the time in which the internal wall would reach 0 degrees centigrade. It took 2 days for the prefab wall to get there. The insulated brick wall took 10 days. And the holes 100 solid wood wall? It took more than a month. Moisture is yet another problem in construction. Water vapor and condensation is such a difficult issue that no company in the world can guarantee construction materials free of condensation and mold growth for more than 5 years. Research in Lower Saxony has revealed recently that 80% of all homes equipped with styrofoam thermal insulation have developed mildew between the wall and the styrofoam. Mold is one of the worst poisons of all, and it can turn a residential building toxic. Dr. Thoma guarantees his Holes 100 homes for 50 years against moisture and mold. He's already built more than 1,000 homes in 33 countries, from the tropics to the Arctic Circle, and so far hasn't received a single complaint. The first serious issue that Dr. Erwin Thoma came across in Germany was fire protection. In the 1970s and 80s, wood houses were not allowed to be built with more than one floor. It was believed to be too dangerous because timber would burn quickly. Dr. Thoma decided he wanted a fire safety certificate from the IBS Institute. It's one of the best-known institutions of its kind in Europe, and it has the largest furnace for fire testing on the continent. A manager at the institute said it's a wooden wall, so let's try to run the F30 test and see how it does. The test examines whether a wall can withstand a flame of 1,000 degrees on one side for 30 minutes. Dr. Thoma had initially claimed that although made of wood, Holes 100 was a completely different structure, and asked them to examine how long the wall would last beyond F30. The manager looked at Dr. Thoma as if he was an idiot and replied, "I said F30. Dr. Thoma insisted. The manager, now irritated, said, "Listen, I've been working at the Institute for many years, and I have tested everything one could test in the timber industry. You should be glad if it can even withstand the F30 test. It will definitely not last any longer." Finally, Dr. Thoma offered to pay for every minute of the test, and the manager agreed, shook his head, and started the test. After 122 minutes, there was a strange sound. It turned out the tank ran out of oil. After that, the Institute did its own test at its own expense. In the end, Dr. Thoma got an F180 certificate. It turned out that after 3 hours of treating a Holes 100 wall with a 1,000-degree flame, the temperature on its other side rose only 1.8 degrees centigrade. The same treatment of a reinforced concrete wall would have caused the temperature on the opposing side to hit 600 degrees even after 20 to 30 minutes, and everything would start to burn. Because of the heat, the concrete begins to crack in layers and release the rebar rods, which then melt. It may seem unbelievable, but even a thick tree trunk thrown into a fire will often remain unburned, while the fire eventually fades and dies out. Only some of its surface would be charred as a result. When the source of the fire disappears, the trunk stops burning as well. For wood to burn well, it must be cut into small pieces and surrounded by air. Today, Dr. Thoma's company builds certified firewalls made of wood for industrial needs. Moonwood harvesting was not only utilized in ancient Rome. After the first book was published, Dr. Thoma was unexpectedly visited by a delegation from Japan led by the highest monk of the Japanese Buddhist monastery, Horyuji. The monastery is home to the world's oldest wooden buildings, erected in 607 AD. As it turned out, those buildings had also been built from moonwood. The head of the monastery wanted to become acquainted with Dr. Thoma's technology because one of his students had left him with a copy of Dr. Thoma's book. After observing everything, the monks left with a word that Dr. Thoma is turning the wheels of something great, because Buddhists believe that one should live in such a way which does not leave any traces behind. Since Dr. Thoma's technology does not harm the environment and does not leave waste throughout its entire life cycle, it certainly aligns with their principles. At the end, the monk promised his support. Dr. Thoma said goodbye, but questioned how they would be able to support him all the way from Japan and did not expect to hear back from them. However, 2 weeks later, a Japanese publisher called to inform Dr. Thoma that he received publication orders for a Japanese translation of his book. Following its publication in Japan, Dr. Thoma started getting orders for Holes 100 from Japan. At this time, entering the Japanese market for building materials was considered virtually impossible even for large corporations let alone such a small company like Dr. Toma's. To build houses in Japan, however, one needed to get the most restrictive certificate for earthquake resistance. Japan has at its disposal the largest platform for simulating seismic shocks, which was where Dr. Toma's employees built a Holes 100 house for testing. Dr. Toma couldn't be present for the testing, and he was very surprised when his employee called him to say they failed to get certified. The certificate is only issued when the tested house falls apart. That's the seismic level at which the construction fails is determined. However, Dr. Toma's house withstood the highest level of seismic shocks that could be simulated. The structure of the house had to be weakened by removing some of the connecting pegs so the house could fall apart so the certificate could be issued. The certificate they finally got was of the highest safety class that can be obtained in Japan. It is hard to imagine, but the dense hard timber that you can crack your head against is nothing but transformed air. Trees draw carbon dioxide from the air, they return oxygen, and use carbon to build the most incredible structure that mankind knows as wood. It only utilizes water and a small amount of minerals from the earth for this purpose. It is a structure so complex that the inner surface of 1 cubic centimeter of wood consists of 150 to 200 square meters in surface area. Not only is this excellent structure the best natural heat insulator, but it also accumulates and stores heat well. In his earlier years, Dr. Toma had already built many of the world's most energy-efficient homes. But even more important, he wanted to prove that it was possible to create an absolutely energy self-sufficient home without an external source of energy like photovoltaics. He accomplished this by using other ancient methods. Therefore, he decided to build a 5-floor house in the Berner Oberland in the Matterhorn area of the Alps. It keeps an optimized facade using intelligent glass elements that during the day, the sun falls through the windows on so-called sun traps, their black stone floors. They warm up and act as short-lived heat accumulators, while the high natural heat insulation properties of the wooden walls act as long-lasting heat storage. Now, the house doesn't have any heating or ventilation, and its air quality and temperature are constantly monitored as part of a research project. Its indoor temperature in winter has never fallen below 18 degrees centigrade. Solid wood is not only the safest material when it comes to fire, flood, or earthquakes, but it also protects its inhabitants from all kinds of harmful, high-frequency electromagnetic waves. It completely stops, for example, mobile phone frequencies. This has been confirmed by research conducted by the Bundeswehr University in Munich. It's also been found that wood is best suited for the construction of rooms with the highest level of surveillance protection required as well. Thanks to this finding, Dr. Toma's company has received a number of orders to build various structures for the German army. Acoustic insulation is very important in the construction of hotels. The nature hotel Weidklause, built by Dr. Toma, is the quietest hotel in the world. The sound insulation values of the wooden walls between rooms reach 63 decibels. That means you can play the drums in one room, while those next door to you won't be able to hear a thing. The 7-floor hotel is built completely from Holes 100, that's 100% pure wood. It proves day by day the incredible static strength of this natural raw material. More so, there is even a huge swimming pool on the building's 7th floor. It has an open-air panoramic view of surrounding mountains. Starting from the day that its foundation was laid, the time that it took to open the building's doors, only 2 months. This is the state-of-the-art Austrian film archive. It is home to 70,000 historical nitro film reels. Fumes from the film erode rebars and reinforced concrete, and therefore wood becomes the most suitable for construction. The archive requires no external source of electricity, and the constantly monitored temperature is at 3 degrees Celsius year-round, since fluctuations are unacceptable. In the summer, the facade warms up to an average temperature of 20 degrees Celsius from the outside. Only a small solar-powered air conditioner is in use. To get that result, the building was modeled after a red ant forest anthill. The larval hatching chamber at the center of the mound is exceptionally resistant to variations in outdoor temperatures. For this purpose, a research project was created using the best engine thermodynamic specialist from BMW. It turned out that wood has two completely unique thermodynamic properties. 1 kilogram of wood accumulates 2.5 times as much heat as 1 kilogram of stone, and the time required to change its temperature is much longer than any other natural raw material. This is the Haramura Church. It's near Fukushima in Japan, which withstood a well-known earthquake. Moreover, it's capable of surviving typhoons with wind speeds of up to 200 kilometers per hour. One should know that for concrete, it is irreversibly damaged once it passes the breaking point. Wood, on the other hand, flexes and shifts into the elastic phase and then returns to its original form. In 2012, Dr. Thoma's company built an energy self-sufficient 5-floor commercial building in Hamburg. It is the Arkneo in Oberndorf, Tyrol. It is a 6,600 square meter office complex in which the tenants' leases say they will not have to pay a penny for heating year-round. The whole complex built entirely from wood. No chemicals used at all. Its temperature is regulated by heat pumps that are powered by photovoltaic cells located on the roof. After about 20 years of fighting against the stereotypes of prejudice and discrediting attempts from the wood and chemical industries, Dr. Thoma succeeded, as he says, in accomplishing technically everything. However, throughout the 20 years, he's failed to scientifically explain and prove the positive impacts of wood on the well-being of people. He says intuition doesn't lie, and the human body doesn't lie either. Why then do I feel so great in the old wooden house, whereas in a modern building my eyes tear up and my throat becomes scratchy? There must be a way to prove the positive impact of wood on people by using academic and scientific methods. He tried with doctors and with medicine-related professionals, but he got nowhere. A few years ago, he was invited to a wood industry symposium. Many scientists and well-known people were part of it. Dr. Thoma noticed one strange older man with Einstein-like hair. Turned out that was Professor Max Moser, who was the department chair at the Medical University in Graz. At a meal, Dr. Thoma jokingly asked him what he was doing at such a symposium full of tree huggers. The professor replied that he'd participated in the AUSTRIAN program a few years earlier, and with his team had created the medical research equipment for the Mir International Space Station. Max Moser is one of the most renowned scientists in Austria, and he was selected for the space program. But what does that have to do with wood? Asked Dr. Thoma. The task of the professor when it came to the space station was to study all semiochemical substances that would affect the health or well-being of the cosmonauts. The space station has a closed air circuit and ventilation is not possible, so the effect of semiochemistry on humans is particularly strong. Semiochemical substances are compounds like pheromones produced by animals and plants that are used to carry information and exert a certain determined influence on the environment. However, the fumes of certain substances and plastics also affect humans. For this purpose, the professor developed a unique apparatus that can measure the effect of secreted substances on the autonomic nervous system of humans. Dr. Toma dropped the spoon from his hand and said, "Professor, I've been looking for you for 20 years. If you can measure such impacts on humans, we must do a joint research project." Moser replied that if he managed to fund such a project, it wouldn't be a problem. But for a project like this, a 6-digit sum might not be enough. Dr. Toma had a lot of experience organizing fundraising for research projects, and after a year, he had a confirmed 7-digit sum for the research sitting on his desk. Therefore, a large-scale research project was organized, and its results left no doubts at all. 2 identical rooms were built for the project. One was constructed of solid wood, while the other was constructed of laminated particle boards. The result of the experiment was somewhat of a surprise. It turned out that 10 minutes after a man walked from the laminated particle board to the solid wood room, his biological functions would completely change. His heart relaxed, stabilized, and slowed down. The semiochemical substances released by the wood immediately informed the body that it could feel safe and was out of danger. 90% of Western Europeans die from 3 main causes: cardiovascular disease, cancer, dementia, or Alzheimer's disease. These 3 risks are exactly the ones minimized by wood. During sleep, the heart rate slows down so that a person saves 1 hour of heartbeats overnight, or 3,000 strokes. As the number of heartbeats in one's lifetime is limited to about 2 billion, one can say that in a wooden room, people live 1 hour longer per day, and the sleep is deeper and more regenerating. People who suffer from sleep problems all the time suddenly fall asleep easily in a wooden room. A walk in the forest has a similar effect on people. Communication by semiochemical substances represents only one type among many for trees. In his life's journey, Dr. Erwin Toma met another outstanding forester, Peter Wohlleben. His books are also available in English. He made a surprising discovery about forests. As it turns out, communication methods between trees are incredibly complex. For example, trees recognize the saliva of various animals. Recent research by Leipzig University shows that when a deer bites a twig, the tree responds differently than when a person breaks it. Trees react to the saliva of caterpillars in a different way. Oak trees, as an example, give off a special smell signal in the form of a semiochemical substance. It calls predators like Hymenoptera bees. They lay their eggs in the leaf-devouring caterpillars, and the caterpillars are devoured from the inside out by the newly hatched eggs. Trees also communicate through their root systems. It's called the Wood Wide Web. It serves to convey warnings to neighboring trees so that they can get ready for danger, like insect attacks or drought. These signals are transmitted, as those in our nervous system, through electrical impulses and chemical substances. Where the roots of the trees do not reach, the information is transmitted through the connected mycelium network. Trees pay their helpers back by providing them with sugar. Mycelia are the largest living organisms on the planet. Their size goes up into the thousands of acres, and some scientists claim that all mycelia on the earth are connected. When trees at the bottom of a slope begin to feel the lack of water because of drought, they message that information to other trees. They close their pores, thereby reducing water loss and slowing down photosynthesis. When one tree is attacked by wood borers, all trees within 50 meters of that tree change production to defensive substances. In our common larch, one of these substances is resin. It has about 1,000 complex chemicals and is the world's best natural fungicide, bactericide, and virucidal agent. Some trees can live more than 1,000 years because of it. The ointment made from resin beats any pharmaceuticals that accelerate wound healing. However, it will never hit the market or doctors' offices because its synthesis and patenting will probably never be possible, and pharmaceutical companies will not be able to make any money on it. This from Professor Max Moser, who was mentioned earlier and who was asked by Dr. Toma to analyze the miracle wound ointment made by his grandmother. As a side fact, the same applies to Indian cannabis, which contains almost 445 unexplored compounds and is a cure for dozens of diseases, including cancer, as shown by the latest research in Germany and Israel. Hotel Sizer Am of the Utaller family is the largest wooden hotel in Europe with 45 family suites. Timber needed for the construction was produced by the Austrian forest in an hour and a half. The forest not only has a healing effect on people, but it is also a system of exemplary economy. Forestry and economics are two academic areas of science which teach things that are completely at opposites. While we profit by exponential growth and elimination of competition as a goal of the economy, the forest is based on cooperation to create the best conditions for the next generation. These are terms foreign to economists. Trees compete with each other only at the beginning of their careers, but they do not try to grow indefinitely and seize all resources for themselves. When a tree dies, it returns each of its particles to where it came from. It leaves no waste in the wake of its life. Waste does not exist, nor is created. The only thing that exists is the circuit and cycle of its life. According to Dr. Toma, this model is the only one we humans may model a sustainable economy on. There is no alternative. Dr. Toma's computerized and roboticized factory draws all the energy it uses from photovoltaics, and the surplus is returned to the electric grid. It manufactures without waste from material that is created from carbon dioxide. Dr. Toma claims that any economy or energy crisis is nonsense. The only crisis in the world is the crisis in our minds. We lack nothing other than the right concept for our economy. Today's furniture is made of particle boards glued together with chlorine derivatives and formaldehyde resins. They are extremely harmful to health and nature, and are classified as hazardous waste for the purpose of their disposal. Their disposal is more expensive than the purchase of solid wood of the same weight. However, it is a billion-dollar industry supported by lobbyists and politicians. Humankind debates global warming caused by carbon dioxide when one tree may neutralize tons of carbons out of the atmosphere. Instead of building waste-free wooden houses, we insulate them with styrofoam, which besides mildew offers minimal effect, and when soiled with plaster is almost impossible to dispose of. We burn carbon, gas, and oil to heat and cool buildings, when a few photovoltaic batteries can deliver more power to a wooden building than it needs. It is now the ideal time to start thinking differently. As you can see from Dr. Toma's example, sometimes one man's perseverance is sufficient to initiate small or big changes in the world.
If you liked it, leave a like. If you liked the content, please subscribe. Thanks for watching.